Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's Saturday show. Today, we're going to talk about needy tenants and really how to empower them and give them more so that they call you less. And it's really about education, I think, really, and educating tenants on just the simpler things and the general day-to-day things and a wee bit of common sense in there as well. What do you think about that, Jim?
The very fact that you've just said needy tenants will be up arms with shelter and living rent and all the rest of it.
I know.
All these tenant bodies will be going mental. What do you mean needy tenants? And it's like it's not anything like that at all. It's not anything to do with needy tenants. It's nothing. I've not got in here, by the way, just in case anybody didn't notice. It's not anything to do with needy tenants at all. It's just a way to manage your tenant situation, I think.
Yeah.
Is that not what you think it is? I think that's what it is, really. A way to manage tenants that, I'll be honest, it's probably the landlord that's created this most for himself or herself.
Yeah.
They've created all that work for themselves because they've just overreacted to everything that happened, when in actual fact there's a lot of simple methods and methodologies that they could actually incorporate into their processes and systems, which would make it far easier for themselves.
Definitely, it is really all about managing expectations and educating the tenants as well. Because some things that we maybe think and take for granted, well, this is how you do this and this is how you do this. A lot of people maybe don't have that knowledge or that skill, and they could easily be taught and shown to people, and that's what it's all about. And once you build up that relationship with a tenant and show them how to do things, they'll become trusting in you as an agent or a landlord, and they'll call you less for the minor things and keep it just to the things that really need to be brought to the landlord or the agent's attention. And I know, there's going to be a lot of landlords there, and some of them are going to feel like they've got really high maintenance and needy tenants, and they're not alone. Do you know, it's a common thing for people to feel. We get so many calls from landlords who are, do you know, at the point of tearing their hair out, and they're getting constant requests to fix simple maintenance issues that their tenants really should be responsible for managing as part of a let. And that's where you need to clear communication and who's responsible for what. And that's something that has always been the case. And I'm sure you've experienced that a lot over the years, Jim.
Yeah, definitely. It's like you said, tearing their hair out. I think I've torn all my hair out and learning all this anyway. I've none left. So don't do what I did. This is what we're going to teach you, how not to do it, so you have actually some of your hair left for all the guys out there. Because literally that's what it does to you. It ages you a lot quicker. You look at the classic example, you look at the people before they became Prime Minister or President, and then you look at them after 4 years, and it's like they've done about 20 years in solitary.
Yeah. But yeah, as you say, fortunately, there is plenty that you can do to help your tenant become really more self-sufficient. And today I'm going to cover a lot of that. And we're going to run through things like understanding what makes a tenant become that needy tenant, clarifying with your tenant what their responsibilities are, encouraging genuine repair requests rather than just all the simple things, formalising the reporting process, and creating maybe like troubleshooting guides and ways for them to be able to resolve things without your assistance, and having those kind of guides in place. Once you're done, once you've done all that, you'll have all you need to turn your tenants into really champions of the domestic chores and general minor maintenance things, and it will really give you a welcome break if you're a landlord or indeed an agent as well.
I would say so, definitely.
Yeah, so we're going to kick off, and obviously, like you say, that obviously referring to needy tenants, but it might be a wee bit of a trigger, but we don't mean it in that way. But then what does really make a tenant needy? And because they don't usually plan, a tenant doesn't usually plan to be incapable or to be a nuisance. But just like in places like the workplace, leaving somebody to just fend for themselves without any proper training, it rarely brings out the best in people. So when your tenant does get in touch, even if it's over the simplest things, it's usually down to a few reasons, and we're going to cover them just now. And first off, many have never owned their own home, and maybe they've always rented, or maybe they're first-time renters. They've been living with their parents, or they're heavily managed accommodation like in an HMO, which is quite obviously the HMOs are quite hands-on and there's not responsibility for the tenant as such. Or it's the same in like student halls and things as well. They don't have that responsibility as a tenant, whereas you go into private residential and you're expected to have that responsibility, and it's down to them. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Jim?
Absolutely. Most students have probably never left the house. The safety and security of their mum and dad. They've been looked after all their life. They've been waited on hand and foot all their life. So in order to start a new beginning, it is new territory for them completely. But there is an expectation from them then that they go into the same situation and somebody's got to wait hand and foot on them. Like, welcome to the big wide world. It's it's that sort of thing. It's they've just done it. They've had it done for them all their life, and I was rightly so. I was like that as well. You know, it was the typical situation that you look at someone, you think, how do I boil an egg? It's just how do I work the washing machine? How do I work the washing machine? What do I do there? And why is this plug not working? Why's my lights gone out? And it's simple things like that. But you have to realise that these people are just starting out for the first time. They need somebody to teach them, to help them, to guide them, to hold their hand, all these different things. And this is why I often say about being a landlord is not necessarily just about renting a house to someone. You literally end up being a social worker some of the time, and a mentor to some of your tenants as well. I've been in the past. I've been either end of the spectrum. At one point, I've been a mentor to some tenants. At the other point, I've been, helping them fill out their forms and getting the right help and support from all the agencies that are stakeholders and helping them get started in life. So I could identify with that straight away.
I think as well, like you say, a lot of tenants who have come from that background and not had that life experience, there's an element of them that they'll be frightened to try and fix things in case it all goes wrong or they do it wrong and they get or resulting in trouble with a landlord, or maybe they'll get a penalty or a bill for doing something wrong and breaking it. And like you say, Jim, things like what's wrong with that plug and what's wrong with the lights, it could be down to just changing a fuse in the plug or changing the bulb, or flipping a switch on the fuse board, or simple things that are general life skills that everybody should have. And you'd be surprised how many people don't have them. And because they've never done it, they've got that fear of doing it wrong or getting in trouble or a fine for doing it wrong and breaking something.
I think the more been instilled the fear of doing it wrong from the people round about them before. That's probably typically just social conditioning, I would say. Mm-hmm. So they don't want to touch anything in case they get anything wrong, because the first thing mum and dad says is, for God's sake, don't damage anything or we'll lose our deposit, or I'll be liable for it. It's all these welcome to the big wide world talks their mother and father is probably giving them, or maybe nobody's giving them at all. Maybe they're on their own 2 feet and they're just fending for themselves and they're just finding their way as they go. That's what I said. That sometimes you'll end up being almost like a mentor to some of these people because it's them starting out for the first time. So I get it completely. I mean, I used to fix all the radiators myself, and then sometimes I used to over tighten the bolt on the joint, and then the actual the nut would crack, it would split, and it's like, oh nut, and then the water would be pouring out everywhere from the radiator itself, and it's like, oh, I wish I'd just got somebody to do that.
Yeah.
So now that's not a normal tenant duty, by the way, but that's the sort of thing as I did as a landlord. And then I thought to myself, I'd be cheaper actually getting a proper contractor to do it and no try to fix it myself, because it's a false economy, isn't it?
Yeah. Another thing as well, obviously, as a letting agent, and we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, I can't remember what show it was, Jim, and it was actually about doing a proper walk around move-in and meeting the tenant at the property still. Because a lot of landlords, letting agents, are doing the online signatures and then, pick up keys at the office, and that's a big problem sometimes, because you're not doing that initial walk around, you're not giving that enough detail and instruction at the start of the tenancy, how things work. Just doing that walk around, make sure they're confident enough, like with this, and how things work, or where they can actually find information if they need it during the tenancy if things go wrong. And if there's not clear and concise instructions or demonstrated to them at the beginning, you're going to have problems, and you're ultimately from the get-go going to have teething issues in the first couple of weeks and ongoing throughout the tenancy. So that's a really important one, I think. As a letting agent, I know that's important.
I've often seen a lot of landlords, and myself in the past as well, give user instruction manuals for everything on the move-in. And I've sent them over in PDFs to them as well by email, just to make sure they've got all the right information. And it's as simple as working the hob. The very fact that they've got to press the gas down while it ignites and then keep their hand on it for about 30 seconds so it actually stays on, because the thermocouple, if it's no hot enough, won't actually keep the gas on and it'll switch off straight away. Same. Probably the biggest ones I learned was the back boilers, the back-to-back boilers. That's the exact same example. The back-to-back boilers, you had to press in the gas control knob, but you had to actually turn it first to reset it. Then you had to press it in. Then you had to press your igniter at the same time. Once you got it ignited, you had to keep your hand on the gas knob, so to make sure that actually the gas valve was still open, to let the thermocouple heat up. So it would send an instruction to the gas valve to stay open, because then if it heated up, that meant the gas valve knew that the gas was ignited and it was actually getting used. Therefore, it kept the valve open. If it didn't heat up, therefore, it switched the gas off straight away. Normal safety procedure. But just that simple thing that I would now take for granted, I wouldn't expect anybody to understand that.
No. Yeah, there's obviously a certain level where the tenant isn't expected to know things, but user manuals is a really good one, and a lot of landlords are really on the ball. Even though we do our move-in pack and things as well, I've had landlords provide me with an additional folder, and it's like all the manuals for any appliances and things that are in the property, and it's a great addition to what we provide a tenant as well, and gives them a reference to how to work things and troubleshoot if they're trying to use appliances and things in the property. But very often as well, we take over some properties for management, and we find that a lot more could have been done to really empower and guide the tenant. And that's where issues have arisen throughout the tenancy, which is actually good news, because it means there is a solution at hand. You've just not reached it yet, and then to get that right and have it in place really does then, like I say, empower and guide the tenant on what they need to be doing. So yeah, user guides are a really good one.
This is where it's clear to set out tenants' responsibilities. The lettings law, for example, requires tenants to act in what they call a tenant-like manner. But the phrase is so open to interpretation. And at your best, your best bet is actually to be clear and ultra clear about this, I would actually say, about your tenants' responsibilities in the actual rental contract. So the rental contract can point out, you've got a PRT in Scotland, you've got a short assured tenancy in England, and then you could add on your own conditions within the what is the direct selling laws. You know, there's conditions in there that it might actually compromise some consumer terms or some consumer agreements or legislation. So you've got to watch what you can put in, what you can't put in. If you need advice, speak to your letting agent about it, or speak to a solicitor about it, because they'll understand that, somebody that's competent in consumer law protection. Because if you put something in your agreement, breaks consumer law, it could actually void the tenancy completely. It could void the contract completely as well, because it might not be valid because you've just broken the law in terms of one of the terms that you've put in. Or be a member of a landlord association and get a proper agreement sent to you as a result of being a member. I mean, just what, £105, £120 plus VAT or something like that, or that's all in, and it's tax deductible as well to be a member of a landlord association. Why would you not do that?
Yeah,
that's just crazy. I mean, that's just a total saving in itself. With the first bit of advice that you need from them, you've saved your money straight away. So it's prudent to be ultra clear about what you're actually doing. I mean, it's the old adage about prevention is better than cure, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, and we refer to that quite a lot. Prevention is better than the cure. And awareness is often the most effective measure as well. So check that, obviously, like you say, Jim, your tenancy agreement and things, it makes the tenants responsible for the issues that they are meant to be responsible for, like you say, in a tenant-like manner.
These are some you're about to talk about, which I have gone on about all the time now. Let this be clear before you talk about it, Richard.
Yeah.
They get the house with an unblocked drain.
Yeah.
unblocked toilet. So the toilet's no blocked, the sinks aren't blocked, nothing's blocked. But then all of a sudden you get calls for things like blocked drains. And it's like, well, wait a minute, how did that block itself? Oh, you've been pouring fat down the sink.
Yeah.
It's like, no wonder it's blocked. That's a normal tenant responsibility. It's blocked because the tenant's done it. That's not on the landlord to unblock that. That's the responsibility of the tenant to get that unblocked because of what they've done. Things like foodstuffs and coffee grounds. I mean, I'm a big fan for juicing. So I've got a lot of cold press, pulp that's actually pushed out of the juice when I juice it. And I make sure it doesn't go down the sink because obviously that's what it'll cause. So these are things like, the things that get poured down the sink. But your common one is definitely your fat. When people have been frying in the frying pan and they've been doing shallow frying, it's an easy option for them just to pour it down the sink and just think it'll disappear. But in actual fact, they leave it in the U-bend, and then what happens is it congeals in the U-bend and just goes solid. And then they phone the landlord and say, well, my sink's no draining. Right, okay, how did that happen? You take the U-bend off, whoa, here we go.
Filled up with fat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is quite a common one, Jim. And we do get it quite often in the initial stages of a tenancy, and they'll phone up. And I mean, even things like toilets, we've seen kids put toys down toilets and things like that. And unfortunately, if we send out a contractor and that's found to be the issue, then it's a tenant liable cost as well.
And so it's a hefty figure, because I know what they charge us. A call out could be £100 or something like that, and that's a hefty figure for the tenant, just no realising that they shouldn't be putting fat down the drain, or should be doing silly things, or making sure that everything's okay, and also educating their children know to do things like that. Here's another thing.
And it could be a cost of things.
Here's another thing. It's really a bone of contention as well between tenant and landlord and letting agent is the mould. Mould, right? There's mould and there's black spot mould that appears around the house. Okay, so black spot mould appears around the house on other walls, mainly the outside walls more than likely. And what's happening here is when you get black spot mould, it's usually a clear indication that it's caused by condensation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, condensation typically builds up by putting your clothes on the radiator. There's no surprise when you get most calls about black spot mould in winter, when it's the colder months, because most tenants, and like I did in the very beginning myself, when I was a homeowner, when I was a tenant as well, I closed all the windows because it was Baltic. I then switched, even put draft excluders on the doors and stuff like that. I then used my shower, opened the bathroom door, and cooking with pots and pans. You're breathing in your bed at night, and that's where most of the condensation comes from, your water vapor and your breath. And that was all hitting the windows. And I was keeping complaining to the landlord at that time. And also, I was wondering myself, because I was a homeowner after that as well, is how on earth is this happening? And it's because you're sealing off every possible way for the condensation to escape. You're putting clothes on radiators, and it's as well, sometimes it's poor placement of radiators caused by the landlords, and maybe even placement of bathroom products, and maybe bathroom seals not done properly, failing to ventilate and after showering, or even cooking itself. I mean, I've seen it quite a lot. What's your experience of this, Richard?
Yeah, definitely. And ventilation in the proper areas, like you say in the bathroom, and obviously having cooker hoods and windows open when you're in the shower, and round the bath seal being done correctly and being wiped down and things as well. It's all issues that come up quite often in tenancies, and it's a kind of bone of contention because it's something that comes up again and again, and you try your hardest to educate on how to best ventilate a property. And obviously we live in Scotland, so I mean, drying clothes indoors is something that we do need to do at certain times of the year, but there's a proper way to do it without obviously causing condensation in the property. And that
dehumidifier.
Yeah.
Putting the stuff in the bathroom and putting the fan on, or opening the window and closing the door, putting the radiator on, and maybe you've even got a utility room, having a pulley in there, putting the radiator on, putting the fan on, and closing the door so it all just goes out the fan, even opening the window itself. So you've all got to contain to one area in one place, so it's easy to ventilate that without actually making the rest of the house cold. So it's just thinking about the whole process, about what's happening, understanding that, and that's why it's important again to give every single tenant a wee handout or a sheet on how to avoid condensation, which is the biggest problem more than likely. And that's the biggest problem. It generally turns into your crisis that you see on the television, where people say, a whole house has been destroyed, all my clothes have been destroyed, you know, because they've been in a cupboard and they've left the condensation. Well, the condensation's and then what they've done, they've tried to imply that it's damp.
Yeah.
Well, it's damp, but it's damp because you've left condensation and you've no aerated anything, and that's why it's gone damp. And you've just left it and left it and left it, and you've probably left it until about, you know, when the landlord actually contacts you, the letting agent contacts you, maybe for a review or an inspection, and then when they say to you, so when did that start happening? Oh, it was about 4 months ago. All right, you didn't think about contacting us then at that point in time, so we could advise you on what to do best.
Yeah, and we're going to move on to the reporting process, and it's so important, and it's probably been seen time and time again, not just by us but by other agents and other landlords, that things are only brought to attention when you pick them up, and they should have been reported a long time before that. Other things, obviously, we finish off about tenants' responsibilities, and when you think about like freezers and things as well, like food spoils or water leaks and broken freezer doors, because the build-up of ice in the freezer caused by them not defrosting the freezer. Defrosting a freezer is something that a tenant's responsible for, and I've seen broken freezer drawers and things in the past, and they're quite hard to replace as well and costly to replace, and it's because obviously the freezer's not been defrosted periodically. I know nowadays we get a lot of frost-free freezers and things, but some of the integrated appliances that are in properties maybe aren't. And that's, again, it's just a general life skill, defrosting a freezer, that a lot of people maybe don't have. And if it is the issue,
surprised how many people actually just put something right against the fan that makes the frost-free freezer frost-free, and then it becomes frosty, and then they say it's not working. And it's like because you've got everything in front of the fan.
Yeah. I've seen freezers like stacked full, like far too much in them, and then like you say, they're meant to be frost free, but that then obviously takes that away. So I mean, they're all kind of things that really you should be aware of, and they are tenants' responsibilities. But you should really be putting all these points down in some form of writing or in like a pack or alongside the tenancy agreement, to be sure to actively draw the tenant's attention to them, so that they don't just initially come to you without reading through it first. So point it out to them, and wherever that information be and where they could find it. So when they come to that point, they have a look and think, right, okay, this is what I need to do before I contact my agent or my landlord.
Yeah, so we kind of worked out what all these trials and tribulations are and what happens in between and why they happen. So what is the actual, how do you formalise this reporting process that you spoke about then?
Yeah, so formalising the reporting process, and then we think about, like, obviously video and things is quite a good thing for us, but and then do you know, I get some landlords and they're so obviously, like we say, we talk about tearing your hair out, and some of them are like so frustrated, and they're like, oh, I'm considering sending my tenant videos on how to get dressed in the morning, do you know? And I'm like, okay, it's something obviously that they say in frustration, but do you know, they get to that point where people come across so helpless when they call. But the good news is you can turn your tenants' first thoughts of action into fixing things. Maybe it's a 2-minute job themselves before they come to you, when you really formalise the reporting process. So removing the phone from the equation, calls are an immediate interruption to your day, and you can they can knock you off your focus of what you're actually trying to do. In a way, that message notifications don't. WhatsApp's really good now. Do you know, it's a great method of communication rather than the telephone. It's quick. It's quite concise. You could do voice notes. You could do quick videos, and you can see that each person is obviously receiving the message and things as well. So there's a lot of different platforms that you could use for communication, not just calls now as well. So you could add that. So get your tenants to WhatsApp or even email initially rather than that call. And then they could provide the details of the problem, and whether it's an ongoing thing, whether it's causing damage or it's affecting possibly another property. Do you know, they could give you all that information without having a big lengthy conversation on the telephone initially. So yeah, and definitely WhatsApp and things is the way forward, and a lot of people use that platform. Referring them back to like their tenancy agreement and their move-in park for any requests that fall within their responsibilities. Like I said, making it quite clear to them this comes back to you, and along with making them aware of the cost of what a contractor would be to actually come and look at an issue. I think sometimes tenants call about a multitude of simple things and don't actually realise the time and the cost involved to actually rectify them or have a contractor come out and look at them, when really it could be done by them, and it is their responsibility. So that's something that's, I think, really important. And we touched on that there about the cost of contractors, especially if it's out of hours. Do you know, if it's Saturday, if it's Sunday, and like you say, if somebody phones us with a blocked toilet, I mean, that's an emergency repair. We can't leave them without sewage, obviously without facilities, and sewage obviously is a big thing if it's the toilet's backing up and things as well. But if the contractor gets there and it's on a Sunday and there's a toy stuck down there, the tenant's responsible for that, and it'll be a double time call-out charge. And we've seen that, and obviously we touched on that already, but we've seen that quite a lot over the years, and it is all about educating them, and that's what obviously we're trying to highlight today as well. Of course, though, the most effective filter that you can have to remove that initial contact call that's maybe not necessary with your tenant is using a managing agent, and the managing agent will be able to implement those kind of strategies. And I mean, that's what we do as and what I do as a letting agent, and obviously our management team. So if you want any tips and maybe advice on how to do that or implement it, or even to have an agent put in place like yourselves, feel free to contact me and run through any of that at any time. My contact number and email address is always in the blog attached to the post that we're talking about today. So I mean, I'm happy to chat anytime about that. So feel free to reach out to me if anybody's watching and has any questions that maybe they want to discuss further about management or how to implement things. But then that brings us on quite nicely to encouraging genuine repair requests. Because of course there is always going to be repairs that need attention and need the proper contractors to come out and fix it. But you really need to encourage that contact's only made really when it's necessary. It's one thing to minimise unnecessary maintenance requests, but you should absolutely encourage your tenant to call about the big stuff and show you and show them that you actually care and really want to address these things when they're necessary. Ironically, many tenants do stay silent on things that matter because they're frightened of being a nuisance, and it's the fear of being a nuisance or a fear of reporting something that they maybe should have then obviously reported earlier. So be clear with them that you want to know immediately about issues that are relevant, and these come down to things like broken down appliances that require a qualified engineer to fix. The oven, the hob, if there's a washing machine, dishwasher, fridge, the boiler is of course a really important one. Any heaters, if it's electric heaters and things as well, the shower, you know, all these important appliances and things that are required in the property, if they're provided as part of the let or they're a necessity for the tenant, then they need to be fixed and attended to by a proper contractor. So that is really important. Damage to the property from severe weather conditions, such as a leaking roof, if there's a broken gutter, a falling down fence, or anything else that they notice about the structure or integrity of the property. These are all really important things that you want to know about as a landlord or an agent, so you could get fixed and addressed very quickly, because they could be to the detriment of your property and the building, and if left can be really costly, and you don't want to have costly repairs on things that could have been nipped in the bud and repaired relatively cost effectively in the beginning or the early stages, rather than left until they're quite a big repair job. So that's another important thing. Breakages and damages by your tenant or even their visitors, so you can work on whether to make repairs now or leave it at the end of the tenancy. You know, you could obviously assess the situation and decide, right, okay, this needs fixed now, or this could wait until the tenant leaves. If they've damaged it, then it's back onto them as the liability of breaking or damaging something in the property. And whether you hold them responsible and deduct up the security deposit and things as well is something that you could go through. It's a fact of life that things ultimately will go wrong at some times, from accidents, or if it's an act of God, if it's weather, and if it's a sense of mutual responsibility around reporting and repairing that consecutively gets the best results from everyone. So there's a split responsibility. The tenant needs to report it in the appropriate situation, and then the associated person, the landlord or the agent, needs to then react and resolve the situation with the proper contractors and a proper timeline and timescale that is acceptable to the tenants reporting it. There's a whole timeline on that and a proper way to do that. If you're a landlord and you're managing yourself and you're not sure how that actually works, again, please feel free to come to me and we could have a chat about the proper process and how that should be done, and how an agent, if you've got one in place and maybe that's not happened, it should be carried out. These are all really important things. So encourage genuine repair requests from your tenant. Don't make them feel like they should be hesitant or have a fear of coming to you as a landlord or an agent to report something, because it's so important that you get to know as soon as possible so you could put in the correct measures to rectify and repair things. And that then brings me on. Finally, we're going to talk about creating a proper troubleshooting guide. If you've ever booked a stay in an Airbnb or holiday let, you'll notice that they have the best ones. Well, the best ones have their handbook, because hosts know all too well that tourists will otherwise constantly ask for help or look for advice on how to do things in the property. And that's when I come back to when I was talking about, I've got some really good landlords who, although we are managing it and we do the move-in pack and things, they do have a separate folder with all the user manuals and how to put things out in the bin schedule, and really handy things that the tenant could refer to immediately without having to bother the landlord or the agent. And it's much of the same for tenants as it is for what I just explained about the Airbnbs or the holiday lets. So it makes sense to give them lots of information when they move in. And that includes the emergency out of hours number to call in case of emergencies. And that's things like, obviously, the boiler, if it's a plumbing or a sewage issue, if there's a leak, if they have loss of electricity or loss of power. These are all up there with emergency call out and really important things that need to be brought to attention. Manuals, as I say, is important. They make the model number and the manual of all the kitchen appliances, the boiler, heaters, washing machines, dishwasher, fridge, cooker, oven, hob, the extractor. All that's really important and can be really helpful to a tenant when they are trying to troubleshoot on their own. If they don't have that information, they're going to come straight to you, and then that takes up your time when you could have just provided it all in the beginning and made them aware of where that is and how to turn to that in the instance of needing assistance. The location of the stop clock is something. The stop clock is really important. It obviously shuts off the mains water to the property. If there's a leak, that is the first thing that anyone should do to prevent any further damages until the plumber gets there to assess where the leak is coming from. So the location of that should be made very clear to all the tenants that are moving into the property, and it should be in the park and on the paperwork. Also, along with the gas shut-off valve, which is usually located at the meter, just next to the meter, that's an important one as well. And the electricity fuse board and trip switches, and the main one, and you usually have individual ones for certain rooms and parts of the area, or it'll do ceiling lights and sockets and things as well, which should also have the clear rooms labelled on it when it's so you know which switch is for which. So these are all important things that can easily be demonstrated to a tenant and provided to them in a park where they could just refer to that, and it's so easy for them to then not bother you because they've got it in front of them. YouTube guides on repressuring the boiler, fixing maybe a toilet cistern that's stuck and not flushing, replacing maybe washers and a screw of maybe the shower head, replacing the shower head. Things like this that are maybe a wee bit more technical, but still kind of fall into, well, they do fall into tenant responsibility. YouTube's really great now. You could even do your own videos and have them on YouTube on a playlist, and you could maybe even attach QR codes and provide them so the tenant could scan them on their phone and get straight into that and watch the tutorial, troubleshoot for themselves and carry out things that they're supposed to do, like repressuring the boiler, or even doing just general tweaks to, like I say, a cistern flush or a shower head to get it functioning again. These are all really good ones, and YouTube is brilliant for that. The website link to the local authority page on collection dates for the bins. As I said, we have landlords who put the bin collection days in their folders and things as well. And a lot of people I know obviously wait until they see what other bins are being put out in the street. But it's good to provide that schedule of the bins. We have a 4-way bin system here in Fife. I know it differs slightly between local authorities in Scotland, but we do have several bins to contend with. And when they go out on the correct day isn't always clear. So yeah, if you give the link even to the website page for the local authority where they could find that, or print it out and put it in the folder, and that will be another thing that will be really helpful to them. I mean, ultimately, a home where everything works as it should, with repairs done properly and clear instructions from easy DIY tasks, this will really create independent and independently minded and capable tenants. Tenants just need that little bit of education on some things that not everybody possesses. And like I say, they may come from certain backgrounds where they've never lived on their own, or they've never owned a house, or you know, there are situations where you need to be sympathetic to, and it's all about providing that right information and giving them the opportunity to be able to do it for themselves, and creating their own independence. And doing that initially in the beginning, in the early stages of the tenancy, will pay dividends throughout the tenancy, because you'll spend less time dealing with the minor issues that a tenant should be responsible for, as long as it's made clear to them and they're provided with all the right tools and information to be actually able to deal with situations that they're required to do within their tenant responsibilities. And I think that obviously today we've covered, and I did start out saying about needy tenants, and I don't want people to be up in arms about needy tenants, as Jim says. It's not about classing them as people that don't know what to do. It's about obviously empowering them to be able to do what they're required to do as a tenant. And it really does help everybody. It builds good relationships. But as I say, that is just for the minor general maintenance things that a tenant's supposed to do. It's so very important that tenants always report to an agent or a landlord when they're required to. And I did run through all the important things there about whether it's leaks or obviously boiler issues and things that need to be brought to the landlord or agent's attention as soon as they can, so they can be nipped in the bud and dealt with appropriately. So I hope that's been quite informative today. As I say, guys, my contact number, my email address is always in the blog attached to this post. So feel free to reach out, jump in the comments. Even if this is on the rerun, if you jump in the comments, we will always come back to people who have questions. And as I say, you could come to me direct. I'm always happy to have a friendly chat and help anyone who has got any questions on what we've covered today about empowering tenants. I think I'll leave it on that, so that they can deal with issues and become independent in a tenancy. And that's it for today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for Jim for joining in from Spain. And until next time, guys, we'll catch you. We've got the verification show on Monday, but we'll be back next Saturday as well for the sales show. And until then, I will see everybody later.